Hello, and welcome to the How I Tested That podcast. I'm your host, David J. Bland. I'm an author and advisor, and I'm fascinated with testing early-stage ideas. I've helped companies all around the world, and in this podcast, I connect with entrepreneurs and innovators who had the courage to test their ideas with real people in the market, with sometimes surprising results. Please join us as we explore the ups and downs of experimentation together. In this episode, I'm joined by Büşra Coşkuner, a product management coach and trainer who helps teams move from project thinking to product thinking. We explore how she approaches product discovery and testing, from building 0-1 products at Doodle to coaching teams across B2B and B2C environments. Büşra shares how to actually operationalize experimentation beyond just A/B tests. We also dig into how to test when you don't have much data, how to combine qualitative and quantitative insights, and why many teams get stuck thinking they're doing product work when they're really just managing tickets. If you're trying to build a stronger testing culture or just want to make better decisions, this episode will challenge how you think about product metrics and experimentation. Welcome to the podcast, Büşra.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks.
I've been looking forward to this conversation all week. I remember, I don't even know, maybe a couple years ago, I think I was running a workshop and I saw you there in a breakout room and I just saw your face for a second. I was like, oh, I want to talk to her about metrics. And I knew I would have train wrecked the entire workshop. So this episode is really an elaborate excuse for me to talk to you and have you explain your thinking on things.
Cool. Looking forward to that. And I'm very curious, like, what is it? What are we going to talk about?
Yeah, well, I would love people to better understand more about you before we jump into all these like nitty-gritty metrics and testing stories. So maybe just give our listeners a little bit of background on yourself and how you got into this world of product.
Sure. I'm Büşra. Hi, everyone. I am a product management coach, trainer for teams and individuals, companies who are moving from a project organization to a product organization, adopting the product operating model, helping teams to basically work in this new scenario, in this new setup, and especially go deeper into the world of product discovery, testing. How do we make decisions with data, with evidence, with insights? Like, how do we make informed decisions? So this is like one big arm of what I do. And then the other big arm is training. So either I come in as a coach or I come in as a trainer and give trainings on how to find the right and relevant success metrics for your product so that you can make informed decisions, whether it's for iterating on your existing product or it's for building 0-1 products. And the way how I came into product management. Oh yeah, and also, sure, I also help product leaders to navigate this transition and also lead product managers, or as I call them, the sandwich roles, to feel confident in their new role when they become new sandwich leaders, let's say. So it's middle managers. And how I got into product is I've always been there. It's a very boring career, to be honest. So I started in university with like some student work already in product management. And I got my first job in product management, but in telecommunications. So classic product management, not in the digital space, not in software, but in classic world. So I know that world as well. In a German big enterprise in telecommunication, I think I don't have to say the name. And then I moved into the software world, into e-commerce, into marketplaces. Some are very well known in the German-speaking area, like Home24. And then I moved into software as a service with Doodle, which was my last employer. And there I was a lead product manager for building up the business scheduling suite, mainly working on 0-1 stuff. Well, one part of my time at Doodle was also transforming the whole subscription experience with subscription tooling and, of course, the whole new checkout and all that jazz, right? But then mainly building 0-1 stuff like the Doodle 101 or bookable calendar, now called Booking Pages, things like that and more. And then I became an independent. That's now 6 years ago when I started my independence. Yeah.
It's amazing how fast he's like, oh, I just started this, and then you're like, oh no, that was 6 years ago. Or for me,
it was 6 years ago, exactly. And at the same time, 5 years ago, I also started my matcha business. So I'm selling matcha in Switzerland, the best in Switzerland, of course. And also run a couple of other things on the side.
Quite busy. I think Something you said, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think I would love to learn a little bit more about this switch from projects to products inside orgs, because I've gone into some orgs beginning that process. So they've usually hired a CPO or a VP of product who came from another org that had some product experience, and they're trying to make this shift. And what is your take on that? What do you see on, like, what are some of the obstacles of a company trying to shift from projects to products? Like, what are maybe some of the big hurdles you see?
Well, first of all, who backs this whole movement? That's the main thing, actually. If the management doesn't even push for the change is not going to happen. It's with like any other change. So there might be a bottom-up spark in there, right? Like some people who are very enthusiastic about it and who maybe even know how to work in this world. But that's it. If the management, like the upper management, the CEO level, right? Like starting with the CEO actually, doesn't say, yes, we want this to change. We want to change how we work. There will be no change. That's reality. So now in a multi-thousand person business, it might not need to be the CEO. So it might need to be, if there's a branch of maybe 300 people, then it might be the leader of this branch, for example, right? So then you can transform this branch or so. But that's the main thing. So it needs backing from the upper management. The other big hurdle that I see is some of them think they know how it should look like when you work in a product organization, but they actually don't. So they have a wrong understanding of what it means. And then they try to, I see this with one, let's say, potential client, which I'm not going to take on, to be honest. And I see that, and they're like, they introduce Scrum and say, we will create product teams now. And we have already introduced one product team, and this is going to work in Scrum. They have a product owner, and guess what the product owner does?
I'm thinking it's more the backlog management and in the ceremonies. Yeah, I've seen that.
Exactly. It's a ticket monkey stuff. And they believe that this is a product organization, and it's not, right? So that's what I mean with the second big hurdle is if you think what it means, but you actually don't know what it means.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think we still mix up projects and products quite a bit. I see product managers, but they're more project managers, and they don't know it because they've never really experienced it. So I do see that a bit in my work as well. Although I do commend them trying to make the change. I do think long term, you're probably better off as a product org for the most part, depending on your industry. So when you think of Doodle, though, was that transition at all happening, or did it feel like a product company when you joined?
That was actually a fun story. When I joined, we were like 30, 35 people. And it was cool. It was like a small family, and communication lines were short, and we were rocking it just like that, right? But we were in the maintenance mode. When I joined, it was a mature product and it was a cash cow for the mother company. And shortly after I joined, we decided we would do Startup 2.0, basically, and kick off another growth phase by opening it up and doing some other things like going upmarket. And that means we need a whole different experience for the customers and then for the users, which suddenly are not the same anymore, right? We were a prosumer SaaS, basically. So B2C, yes, consumers, but then also the prosumers, the professional consumers. We had subscription tiers, but yeah, nobody knew it. That's what it is.
I was going to say, I don't remember the tiers.
Exactly. It was hard to find, and there was no value in the tiers and the subscription, or like little value, like turn off the ads, right? But the point was, if we really wanted to deliver on this promise, then we had to start working in a different way. And that meant, like in 2017, I joined Doodle. I left 2020. And in this almost 3 years that I was there, we were the team that basically, I keep saying, transformed Doodle into a junior product-led organization. I keep saying junior product-led or product-centric, however you want to call it, right? The product operating model, whatever the word is that we use today. So we took it there and we changed the way how we worked. And you can imagine I join and I mentioned like, you introduced me as the person to talk to about metrics and data. And imagine this, I join Doodle and we have no data. Like, how do you want to make informed decision if you don't have any data? Yeah, that was a fun story.
Yeah, I think we overlook that sometimes where it's like, oh, we do this like build, measure, learn loop, but we can't measure. And it's like, well, what do we learn? And it's really easy just to turn that into a build loop, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You just basically, you measure, you've built things. That's what you're measuring. But I was always a fan of like the pirate metrics thing, which is AARRR, which is acquisition, activation, retention, and then sometimes referral revenue or revenue referral, whatever sequence you like. And I would always give talks on that, and I would go into sessions and we'd talk about that. And then people are like, oh, but we can't measure any of that. Like we don't measure it. So the idea sounds great, but then if you don't have a baseline metric to kind of use, we're trying to focus on, let's say, retention. We want to increase retention. And you do something, but then you're not measuring retention properly, and you don't know if that had an impact. But it looks better, and you think it was better, and therefore you kind of say, yep, that was a win, and move on. I think we constantly underestimate the value of instrumentation there and getting that baseline, because it's hard. You have to prioritize it. You have to spend time doing it, but there's always more things to build.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. And funny that you mentioned pirate metrics. At Doodle, we use pirate metrics not as Dave McClure's funnel, but as Ash Mariah's customer factory. And that was a game changer for us as well, to basically formulate our success metrics. And it helped a lot. I mentioned I worked in 0 to 1 products like Bookable Calendar and Doodle 101. And we basically mapped the whole experience of these new products on the customer factory. Like, what is our assumption about the page where the user will be activated? What is our assumption about the page where we see the biggest value to get the person retained? Where does the revenue part, the monetization part, the revenue piece happen? Obviously on the pricing page and checkout, and of course, right? And how does our referral engine work, and so on and so forth. So it helped a lot. And when you build new products, you don't have a lot of data, right? So we didn't have so much data anyway, even like for the polling part, which we fixed afterwards, right? So we did a whole big initiative on setting up our data infrastructure. But then for the new products, you don't have so much data anyway. And then you try to quantify the pieces with data that is never going to reach significance, right? So like, how do you do that? But the customer factory helped us a lot with that. That was good.
I like the customer factory model. I think I've drawn that out a few times for people and credited Ash on that. I feel as if a couple of funny stories. One, I gave a talk in San Francisco, and I didn't know the rest of the agenda of the people inviting me in. So I was like one of the first people in. And I came in, I was like, funnels are useless. Don't even think about funnels. Think of it as a factory or systems thinking. Because Ash, I think he gave me one of the early copies of that book to preview. And I was like, oh, this looks like you're applying systems thinking to, pirate metrics. This is really fascinating. And I gave this big spiel, and I was like, hey, funnels, completely useless, don't even think. And they're like, that was great. And they're like, next up, here's so-and-so to talk about funnels. And I was like, no, I completely, sorry, man. Like, this is going to be a tough talk. But
that's cool.
I think with that model, a couple things, and I want to dig into this a little bit. So one, the model works pretty well. I still like the model. I think it helps anchor your testing. So for example, are we testing to increase acquisition? Are we testing to increase activation? Are we testing to increase retention? Are we testing to increase it doesn't happen often, but if I work with a company who is all in on metrics and how they measure, I feel as if it gives you a place to anchor your testing. You're like, you know what? Acquisition is looking great, but people aren't activating. So let's not spend all our efforts testing more acquisition channels. Let's test on how to get them to activate. And the deeper question is, what does activation mean for us? And so the way I try to lead people into that, and you probably do this similar, is what does acquisition mean for you? What does activation mean for you? And it can get pretty complex, because you can say, well, we have different classes of users, like subsegments that activate at different ways, or they retain in different ways. And I like the quantitative side. I think where I've tried to add to it is the qualitative. So I like the aware, hopeful, satisfied, passionate, which sort of maps to it, you could say acquisition, okay, yeah, I can measure cost per acquisition, but also am I measuring awareness? Like, are we generating awareness? Are they becoming hopeful, right? Is that why they're activating? Is because they're becoming hopeful? Are they staying around because, retention is satisfied? And then are they referring because they're passionate? It doesn't line up exactly. I had this chat with like the late Brant Cooper and then Patrick Vlaskowitz about this back in the day. And they said, yeah, I kind of get what you're getting at, but it doesn't really line up that well. But I think reason I was doing is I was looking for the qualitative side. Because I think what you're saying here is, yeah, we can implement that metric and we will have quantified information to look at. But the qualitative side, I think, is equally as important in that system.
Absolutely. Let me say two things about that. So first thing is, I have seen how well it works in the majority of the cases, but then there are many cases that the customer factory doesn't work. So what I do with my clients is that I have taken it a step further, and I'm basically using the R pieces a bit more loosely, and I model the way how the company's business model really looks like, and that can look very different from the customer factory. I have some examples about how I would map LinkedIn, how I would map Miro, and so on and so forth. And I call it success engine based on Eric Ries's engines of success. And why I mention that is because you just mentioned, like, maybe we have to look at awareness. Maybe there's something in between that is more about engagement. There's maybe something in between that is more about the habit loop. So you can put that nicely into not a concept, but like you can visualize very well how the business model really looks like and how these pieces really feed into each other in the real world, instead of sticking to the customer factory template when you look at the pieces independently from the template, right? And you model them and visualize them in a way that it really reflects the business model. So that piece that you mentioned sparked this thought in me. And the second thing is the qualitative part. I absolutely agree. We keep saying, right, so quant can tell you what is happening, but only qual can tell you why it's happening. So wherever I say data, I keep saying qual and quant. So it's both. Qual is data too. And especially in businesses when data is when you have only little data, it's so important to get qualitative and like pieces in, right? So that's one of the main things that I keep telling my clients. As I mentioned, I ended up working a lot with B2B clients, right? Even though I have a B2C background, I work a lot with B2B now. And I keep saying that you don't have to, I hear this every day, right? So, we don't have enough data to quantify stuff. Well, you do have some data. Quantify the qualitative part, right? So if you talk to, even if you don't have direct access to your customers, or you don't have any contact at your customers, you have salespeople. And yes, they are super annoyed about you talking to them and asking them questions. But if you talk to 5 of them and 4 out of 5 mention this one specific topic as the most annoying topic of their clients, well, you have a signal then. It's a directional thing. And that is good enough for you to understand that, yes, there is something to look at. That is enough. Like if you don't have a lot of data and can't be super detailed about it, then quantify the qualitative part. And that's okay.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up. That happens a lot in B2B. I'm wondering, what are the differences? When you think about testing B2C, which it seems like that was your sort of like foray into product management, and that's where you kind of grew up in. And also B2B, since you work in both worlds now, what do you see the difference between testing in both? And you hinted at it there, but I'm curious what you're seeing with the companies you work with.
Yeah. And I learned, actually, it's not even B2B versus B2C, but it's environments with lots of data and environments with little data. It can be a B2B company. For example, Miro is B2B, but it has lots of data, right? So you can analyze a lot, for example. But let's keep it as a shortcut. Let's keep B2B as a shortcut for not a lot of data and B2C for a lot of data. So in B2C, when you say testing or experiments or experimentation, the default thinking is A/B testing. And I'm like, ugh.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. Why is this? Okay, I don't want to rant about this.
Do it, please.
But the A/B marketing people, man, they have. It's like when the cereal, like there's a certain type, or it's like the people that market like cranberry juice, and now you have cran everything. It's like, how did the A/B testing crowd co-opt the entire realm of experimentation? It's fascinating to me to watch.
Yeah. I would love to know that. I don't know how it happened, why it happened, but I think it's a bit about this problem of, I live in the intersection of lean startup, product management, agile bubbles. And we use many, many words that are like the same words stand for different things. And then when you move from one bubble to the other and throw that word in, and you think everybody knows what you're talking about, turns out they pick it up from their perspective. And then, because we're mixing, like these bubbles are mixing, which is actually good. I love that, right? So they have to be mixing because we're all doing the same actually. And we're all trying to achieve the same. But the problem is then that the one group's definition of that word dominates suddenly. I don't know.
It drives me a bit insane at the moment. So I was doing outreach on, trying to find trends in the industry. And I was like, okay, I'm going to interview people about experimentation. And I would reach out to people on LinkedIn. We'd get on a call and I'd start mapping out what they're talking about. And it always led to A/B testing. It was always, we're A/B testing across the company. Or
I think it comes a bit from this trend in B2C in the early digital world, let's say. What was the main thing that happened to all of us? E-commerce. And in e-commerce, there is something called conversion rate optimization. And what do they do there? A/B test the hell out of everything. So when it starts from there and spreads into the world, into the software world, what happens when someone who was in e-commerce for quite a long time suddenly works on software as a service, which was not the beginning of internet, right? The beginning of internet was informational websites like Wikipedia and e-commerce. So, and then when this person goes into software as a service, what do they take with them? The wording, experimentation, which is, in their world, A/B testing. So I don't know if that is true, but this is how I try to explain myself how this whole thing happened.
I wonder. And I'm not anti-A/B test. I actually think it's a valid way. I think where I get pushback is I made the mistake of putting dots in my book, which has still come to haunt me to this day. So I really revisit how I think about the visualizations and what I write now. But, A/B test is like the end all be all of experimentation. Like it's the best kind of test you could ever run. And if I say, well, not really, it's context specific, but there's just so much more. And I think, I probably irritated a lot of people by taking a bunch of methods and calling them experiments. And they're like, well, it's just doing research. I was like, yeah, but, you're looking at your riskiest assumption and we're tying it back to that. So that's why I call it an experiment. And I use it very broadly. So I get that. But I think there's like two spectrums here. There's like using it to describe everything you do, like everything's an experiment. Or the other extreme is like, it just means A/B testing. And I just see the latter more now. It feels like it's just A/B testing.
Yeah. And then coming back to the B2C thing, main thing that they are doing there is A/B testing. And there are companies that have an A/B testing culture, right? So any little change has to go through an A/B test. And even if it doesn't have enough traffic, it still has to go through an A/B test. And if you dare not running an A/B test and just launching the change or try to do a different type of test, then the data and experimentation people in that company stand by your desk and asking you, like, why didn't you do an A/B test? I will talk to you, line manager kind of thing, right? So there are these companies out there. So that's the one extreme. B2C equals A/B test, and there's no other type of experiment. Then there's the nuance of B2C does not necessarily mean A/B test. So Doodle, as I mentioned, was mainly B2C, but also very much B2 prosumer, right? So we have professional consumers. And the early adopters of the new tool set that I was building with my team, they were professionals who needed a tool that would work for them, right? And at the same time, So we had a big user base, which we used for testing our new solutions, yes, but still there would be only a couple of thousand that would join the closed beta, for example. How would you get enough data for A/B testing in a pool of 2,000 people? You can't. And then even like later on when we opened and we had the open beta phase, still like you would never get enough in a very short amount of time to significance today, right? So basically the other nuance of B2C is you do run tests like fake door tests. You do run tests like for example, at Doodle, when our early users requested a preview feature that would be technically very difficult to build, we run a fake door test with a preview button showing a pop-up saying like, hey, thank you. We will count this as a vote for it. Is that okay? Or were you just curious to see what happens, kind of? And then we would have two buttons, just curious or yeah, call me in, kind of, right? And then we would count how many people clicked that, like how many people saw the page, how many people clicked the preview button, and how many people said, yes, I'm interested. And just to understand if that was a real request, like, is this really a thing? Or like, should we really build it? Or whatever, let's throw it away. And turns out, yeah, people wanted it. So we built it. But then at the same time, we would run tests like sometimes we would just build it. We had a ranked list of feedback coming in. And on the bottom, somebody, like one person wrote, or two, I think, wrote, I would like to have a field, a text field, like on the page where I invite someone to book on my calendar. I would like to have a text field where I could write a message. And it was not our priority, but we knew we had a problem with the ratio of people that would copy the link to the calendar and send it out to the people elsewhere, like via email or whatever, versus inviting them into Doodle so that we would also have that person in the system, basically, for the network effects, right? And we were like, okay, it's, we could just build it and see what happens, because what is it? It's not risky. It's just a text field. Like worst case, what? We will remove it and it will not destroy anything in the system. Let's just build it and see what happens. And boom, we improved the ratio from 1-4 to 1-2, right? So sometimes building is the test, but then you have to treat the release as the experiment, right? And it's not always good, obviously. A/B testing. There is no variant to compare it to.
Right.
And then sometimes we have tested the name of the tool. And that was a very qualitative test, right? So we collected, for Bookable Calendar, we collected some ideas. How should we call this tool? And then we opened up one of those remote usability testing tools that we were using. And then we asked questions like, what do you think what this tool does when you hear this name? Which of these names match? Like, here's a description of what the tool does. Which of these names matches best with what the tool does? And so on. So like, we had a couple of questions. And then there was a very much data-informed decision to call the tool Bookable Calendar. Now, in hindsight, when you look at the initials BC, there was a rumor that I chose the name Bookable Calendar because of the initials BC. It was just coincidence.
Good. Okay. But there's more than just like, I think you're onto something here with sometimes you just build. You just build. And I do think I love that people want to test more than, let's say, in 2010. I love that I'm not having to convince people of it. But at the same time, you don't treat everything as a test. That would be mentally exhausting. And it doesn't deserve it. It doesn't warrant it. Some of the things the cost, especially like we look today with AI and everything, which we can get into as well. But like getting things out there, sometimes it doesn't have to be this giant like process. Sometimes you just build it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the B2B side of this, and yeah, let's talk about it, because I don't fully agree with the product world that says like, oh, now that we can build with AI, we have to think a lot more about the problem to solve. I partially agree and partially don't. But anyway.
Okay.
Hot take.
I want the hot take. So what is the disagreement here?
Okay, do you want to hear this first or the B2B version of testing?
Oh, this is very conflicting. Let's come back to this after the B2B version of testing.
Okay, so the B2B testing, many times it starts with only interviews. Yes, if this is the biggest thing that you can do because you don't usually have contact to your customers, but you are in the product team and you need something, then we start with the thing that A, is easiest to do, and B, might open up some doors, which is talk to your salespeople. Hopefully they do win-loss analysis. And so they do have some data on the topics of why things get rejected. They have relationships as account managers, so they will be able to tell you how the relationship with the customer is. They can do this kind of thing. So like start with this type of conversation. And yes, they want you to solve some problems for those customers that keep complaining about stuff, right? So get this out from the brains of them. That's one thing. The other thing is one client of mine, for example, is building a 0-to-1 thing, but he's testing the features of the 0-to-1 thing separately. And he has a dashboard, a spreadsheet, where he basically says the experiment is, or for example, the hypothesis is this feature that we're building is going to help create the painkiller feeling for the tool that we're building. Because so far it's been like the tool itself has been considered as a vitamin and not a painkiller. So what he does is he builds a prototype with Lovable, for example. B2B, yes, you can do that.
I'm a fan of Lovable. I don't hear as many B2B stories, so I like this.
Yeah, so he built this feature in Lovable, embedded it in the tool that was built with real code, let's say, quote unquote. Yeah, for everyone who listens to that, real code, quote unquote. And he embedded it in their new tool. And then you have to be best friends with your sales buddy, right? So he's best friends with his sales buddy. And basically they tracked the funnel. B2B funnel means you have a first call. Maybe you end up having a second call, maybe only with that same person, ideally with a second person. And maybe you end up with a third call. Maybe in the third call, there's someone who either owns the budget or has some say in the whole decision-making process. And then maybe there's a fourth call, and then maybe there's a sale. So there is a funnel, and he tracks the funnel. How much did this new feature help to go through this funnel, like from step to step, up to which step, and how fast, right? So he's tracking how fast he or the salesperson goes through the funnel, with the customer goes through the funnel, basically. And this is super cool. And basically, the salesperson has to score how helpful it was. Like, did I show this feature to the customer? Yes or no? How helpful it was to convince the customer that this tool is super cool, and how helpful it was to make sure the next step in the funnel, like the customer goes the next step in the funnel, right? And he takes notes as well. And this is amazing. This is fantastic. Like, this is how you can test in B2B. Like, as an example, another team, for example, did clickable prototypes and reached out to the customers that they were in contact with, like the employees of their customers, and basically showed the whole vision thing. This is what we think of. Give us feedback. They had only one chance to talk to them, and that's what they made out of it, right? So they made a mix of problem interview in the beginning, then they showed the prototype, and then they collected the feedback. And that's it. That was the one-shot thing that they did. But they did it. And then they collected how many times the one or the other topic was mentioned. A third example on an AI feature, another team is building a new AI tool that is basically about, let's say, a collective space to discuss about, the purchase, let's say, a bit like a self-serve thing. And the main thing was, how do you know that they need something like this? Two things. One, they see that today, and that is that is research, but that can be your test, right? They see that today, these people are connecting on other channels like LinkedIn, or like they do group conversations on LinkedIn or group conversations on WhatsApp, what they shouldn't be doing, because that's a business world, right? So you shouldn't be doing that. And that is a strong signal that they are looking for some way to have a space to discuss something collectively. And second is, well, we will run an experiment with a link to a custom WhatsApp group so that they don't have to set up the custom WhatsApp group. And we will see if they will say, yeah, finally there's someone who actually supports us in connecting and we don't have to do it on ourselves, right? So that is the experiment. We will send them a custom WhatsApp link and not build a custom tool for that in the first step. It can be so easy.
Yeah, I think it's cultural. I think you'd be really creative in B2B testing. I think, if you tap into people's creativity, there's a lot you can do.
Yeah. And just to mention, all of these examples are in very niche B2B markets where the market is 200 potential clients in total, maybe 300, and that's it. Super niche. And you can do that.
I love that. I feel as if lately it's been switching costs that I've been trying to help sales with. I think sometimes in B2B sales, everything sounds great, but then we forget, or maybe we just don't make it a priority of understanding, even though they love the solution, if it costs them like $5 to $10 million to switch to the new one, that's something we need to uncover sooner versus later. And I saw Alex Ostwalder, he posted the forces diagram a few weeks ago from Bobby Muesta. And I still use that to today. I still use it because we're trying to think of what's going to help make the switch, which is going to prevent. And this is you can think of it as testing, especially in B2B where B2C, switching cost matters, maybe not so much. But in B2B, it can be millions of dollars to switch. And that is something you want to test for sooner versus later. So I think I'm loving that you're sharing stories about B2B because I do think we need to get more of those stories out there that yes, it's possible. Yes, you can be creative. Yes, maybe you don't have as much data. And I like your framing of having data versus not as well.Maybe that's even more useful than coming back to the old B2C versus B2B debate. I'm wondering.
But it's very mouthful, so it's very difficult to coin that.
So at the risk of making this an hour-long podcast, what is your hot take on AI and testing? If you will indulge me on this.
Yeah, so I work a lot let's say my brain works a lot in first principles thinking. Basically going down backwards, going down the rabbit hole backwards and trying to understand why are we doing X, Y, Z? What is the initial reason that made us do X, Y, Z? What is the initial reason that made us test? What is the initial reason that made us understand the problem space very, very, very well before we build? What is the initial reason that we keep saying you should validate the problem or evaluate the problem space and the solution space before you write any line of code? Because writing was expensive. It's not anymore. So 2 thoughts on this. Or one, whatever. And maybe there will be third or fourth while I'm talking. Let's see. But the main point is, 1, coding was expensive. Pivoting was expensive because coding was expensive. Changing your mind all the time destroys trust, and so on and so forth. Okay, that one, depends on the context. In niche B2B, maybe. Now, building is not that expensive anymore. Why shouldn't we just build and see what happens? I mentioned this text field example, right? Why didn't we just build it? Why didn't we A/B test the effect of it? Because it wasn't risky at all. What is risk? Risk is, we build something and it blows up the whole product. Nope. Or it's so complex that it's gonna take us a long time to build it, which means a lot of money to throw in. Nope. If we build it wrong, then the customers will be upset. Maybe, depends. And then if the customers are upset, it will take us a long time to fix this. Nope. So what is risk now? First principles thinking. Now, the risk depends on your very own situation. If you are a company that, B2C, there is no risk. Sorry, there is no risk at all anymore because consumers are okay when you mess up one small thing and then you fix it like the hour later or the day later, whatever. I mean, when we took Doodle one-on-one out of beta, it was down for a month. Yes, it was down for a month because there was some update that we didn't see. We were at the same time refactoring the whole old system. And there was one API call that was basically destroying everything and we couldn't find it. And it took us like almost a month, like 3 weeks or so to find that. Who was upset? Yeah, not many people. And even if once it's up again, well, yeah. In B2B, what is risk? Well, reputation risk. Yes, maybe. But then at the same time, it means your position, your image wasn't solid enough. And where is the reputation risk? When does the reputation risk happen? Well, if you work in a very conservative industry, their reputation risk is real. When you work in a regulated environment, there is not only reputation risk, but there's also legal risk. Yes. And now you see we're talking about risk, right? Viability, feasibility, and desirability. It's the feasibility stuff that is maybe risky. But other than that, there's not much risk anymore. Why would you have to test so many things to make sure that you have worked on the right problem if you can build a solution and with the feedback on the solution, you can see if you were working on the right problem or not? That's my point about, yes, I agree. We need to make sure that we work on the right problem, because if it's not the right problem, nobody will give us money to use the product. Or if it's not about money but usage, then nobody will use that product or feature. It's not only about products. We're not only talking about 0 to 1 products. We're also talking about features, right? And nobody will use it. Okay, yes. But you can figure out if you were working on the right product with the solution. Build the solution and see if it was the right problem. Again, make sure that the release is the experiment. Again, make sure that you know what your hypothesis was, what your assumption was, what your hypothesis was, what your success metric, there we are again, is, that will tell you that you are onto something. Don't just throw it out and see what happens, right? Spaghetti at the wall thing. Define it up front and then see if it was the right problem to work on or not. You can iterate very fast now. I mentioned, before we started recording, I mentioned that I'm running interviews with product leaders whose companies went through AI adoption. And one of them said something that still sits with me. She said, we've never been as agile as we are right now because we can now change our minds so quickly with AI coding. And that it doesn't matter if you're in B2B or B2C. That's my hot take on that. Like, you don't have to think too much about problem space anymore, or to make sure that you are really working on the right problem. You don't have to do that anymore.
So the pushback I heard as recently as last week on this, and I think I was talking to Jeff Patton about this, who I admire. He's influenced my career quite a bit. And he said, with the speed that we're doing this, imagine you go into a restaurant and you look at the menu and you pick something and what you eat is horrible, or it's not like amazing. And then the next day you come back to that restaurant and the entire menu's changed and you pick something else and it's also not very good. Your customers aren't going to keep coming back to that restaurant. So I think the point he was trying to make was, yes, we can change things faster, but the quality still matters and the problem we're solving still matters. But I do think it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. It can't be like infinite spaghetti at all the walls all the time. So I do think there's a balance to this as well. I hear what you're saying, but I do think we have to be careful of not taking it to the extremes.
Oh, that I agree, 100%. So as I mentioned, take the release as the experiment and make sure you know what you are testing there. Like, I see every release as a test. And if you see every release as a test, then it's definitely about quality. So it's not about just randomly building stuff and throwing it out there. It's about, again, informed decisions. Like, there is a reason why you initially thought you might want to build the solution. And instead of spending 1 month on researching on whether that's a good problem to solve or not, dig into your data again. And this is very difficult. This is senior level stuff, right? To make sure that you don't fall victim to your own bias. that for sure. But you have an initial assumption on why you went that path, why you went down that path, and then you don't need to extend your solution testing by another 4 weeks to figure out if you are working on the right problems. I fully agree. The problems that we're working on matter even more than before, I would even say. I said this when no-code came out 6 years ago, and I was fully involved in the no-code movement. I learned to no-code, basically. And I have an article even on my blog that says, yes, there is a big risk that we build even more shit out there. and then it's clutter, internet clutter, and that shit is out there and nobody cares kind of thing. So if you don't have the guts to also take it down, then don't take it up at all, right? And I think I accelerated that. There's a lot of bad stuff out there, and it's going to take some time until people will learn to not just shit every bad stuff that they have in their mind. You really have to have this testing culture. Let's put it this way, this testing culture of admitting this was bad, I will take it down. If you don't have that testing culture to also take stuff down, then I am still on the side of the things to say, well, then please validate the problem first before you build anything. But if you have that testing culture and the guts to say, we were wrong, we will take it down, then you can test your problem with the solution. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying problem space doesn't matter anymore, or it's not important to make sure that we are working on the right problem. I say that there's a new path to understand if we are working on the right problem or not. And that is by getting to the solution faster.
Yeah, I like that framing. I think something you said is really important there is regards to throwing it away or being willing to throw it away or take it down. And this was something like some of the most successful products I've ever advised on. We're talking like tens of millions of customers. We threw away the MVP before we ever scaled it because it was never meant to scale. You know, we were testing it to learn, is there a fit? Do we have the right segment? Okay, let's understand how they're using it and generate all that evidence. And we're like, you know what? Let's throw that away because that is not something, like we can rebuild this in a way that now we have the evidence, they're confident enough to inform the design of the rebuild. I don't think that's still common. I still think we fall in love with things really quickly. And I used to think that it was the time, it was the effort we put into that. That's why we're in love with it. No, I watch people like vibe code stuff in 30 seconds and they love it immediately. So I don't think it's the time anymore. There's something deeper there we have to address about our investment in kind of manifesting this thing into the real world that's in our head. Like it's almost like we're in love with it before it even gets to be a product. So I do think we have to be very, very careful of that. And I like that framing of you have to be willing to take it down or you have to be willing to throw it away. I think that's a good threshold to call out.
And that brings us back to balance, right? So because I agree with you totally, like you have to have some balance. And that's maybe also one of the things that our product community has to learn to not think in extremes. When you go on LinkedIn, everybody's on one extreme, right? And even my hot take is not to be taken in the extreme. I mean, it's more about saying, hey, there is a new tool in your toolbox. And if you have, of course, you have to find the balance. It's also about strategic thinking, right? So the more strategic the topic is, the more risky it is, right? And there you cannot just throw out a solution and say, oh, let's see how that works, right? So you cannot do that. So you have to make sure that the problem space or the opportunity that you're looking at is solid. You have to do that before you get to your solution. But if it's about daily stuff, like a small feature, don't exaggerate it. I mean, try things out and treat it as an experiment, treat it as a test, and then see if it works. And if it doesn't, then take it down or iterate, right? So that's the other option. Kill, pivot, persevere in the end. Yeah, so that's so much about balance. Absolutely. There's product people don't think too much in extremes. Please,
yeah, I hear you. I like ending on that note of balance. In the olden days, it was more like, well, we can't test anything, so we're just building this giant thing and finding out if it works. And then we shifted to let's test everything. And not everything needs to be tested. So I do think it's about balance. I want to thank you so much for hanging out with us. We covered so much. I learned so much just by hearing you speak and reading what you write. We learned about how you came into product management, how you kind of grew up in B2C, how you tested stuff at Doodles. I love the stories you shared, how B2B works compared to B2C, how we think about experimentation and the words we use and how we find balance. I really, really appreciate your point of view. If people are listening to this and they're like, hey, I need her help. I'm in this company and I feel very alone, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so there are two ways. One is LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. I don't know for how long, to be very honest. I'm like, LinkedIn isn't fun anymore. Today, I had to remove my sparkle because they forced me to remove my sparkle, the emoji in my name. So I put it in my headline. So I'm the one with the stars. Anyway, so LinkedIn is one way. The better way is probably through my email. We can leave people my email, or through my website. There is my email in the general terms. So you can find it there. You can read my blog, subscribe to my newsletter on my website. So it's busra.co/blog. Yeah.
Definitely. So we'll include all those links in the description and also in the detail page. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. This is why I was looking forward to it all week, because I learned so much by just chatting with you. So thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of How I Tested That, where we share stories about experimentation, tips, and tricks. If you learned something new, please recommend us to a friend or colleague. And remember, keep testing your ideas.